You're listening to Love and Libido with me, your host, Dr. Emily Jamea. The goal of this podcast is to educate and inspire. My hope is that you will learn tools to create connection and cultivate passion, both within yourself and in your relationships. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
First of all, language is something that I'm obsessed with. I don't know if you know, my first degree is linguistics, because I thought if we don't know how to talk, we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and often language is all we have to communicate, and it's the least effective place to be, like the tool that we have. So let's talk about control. One of the assumptions, and going back to the first question that you posed at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about the assumptions that people have and stereotypical assumptions that people have around Muslim community. I think it's really interesting because control is one of them that always comes up. Who is controlling what? Even with the genital practices, one of the things that I was left with was who owns whose genitalia? Like if your partner asks you to go get a Brazilian wax, is this whose genitalia are we talking about? But I want to do it because I want to give pleasure to my partner. Yes, but that would not occur to you if your partner didn't pose it. Yes.
Right.
So then I can actually expand it across cultures and whatever, right? But within the Muslim community, I would say there are gender roles. There are certain interpretations of Islam that talk about LGBTQ plus communities, that about the, around the Lut community within the Quran, and the interpretation of that going beyond and without considering the context that we're living with.
Right.
So, for example, we are going to lose a very faithful Muslim from the community because of their sexual orientation. To me, it's reducing a person to, can I talk about anything here?
Yes, of course. Please.
Okay. So for me, many of the words that are used for LGBTQ communities, by the way, is mostly gay men rather than women. So lesbians don't get the privilege to be talked about as much, just so you know.
Yeah.
The gays, they are actually often reduced, even the word that describes a gay person, even the words within majority of cultures that oppose it is reduced to the asshole. So in a way, when
to
you're
a body part,
to that body part, right? So it's like, so really, are you kidding me? Like the whole person is ignored.
Yeah.
And that body part is highlighted. So these are the things that we're trying, like, for example, with the BBC program that we had, I worked so hard with the Academy of Language in Iran to see if we could expand those words, that, we don't actually call them with that street and vulgar language, but actually call it like a relationship orientation, sexual orientation, right. So that John Money talks about, when you talk about a gay person, it's like a person who writes with right hand and left hand. It is the orientation.
Right.
People really need to accept that.
It is what it is. Yep.
So like even scientifically, we have brain studies, we have it's really interesting to me that yes, parts of it is socially constructed, context constructed, but on the other side of it is really interesting as how, and it's all based on fear, to let go of that control, that, here's what we know. But also if you just expand it beyond Islam, beyond Quran, beyond anything, in cultures, when there's a lineage of traditions, even try your best to cook an ancient recipe in a different way. Add an ingredient, see what will happen to you.
My husband gets furious at his mother when she does that because he's Persian, as we've talked about that. And so he's like, these recipes have been around for thousands of years because they're perfect. Don't change the ingredient.
Exactly.
But,
so it's as if, we want to hold on to that.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it, we are actually shedding human beings. It's not just the food ingredient. It's like, this is a valuable member of the community that we're going to lose. So when you talk about the things that are controlling the gender roles that did not evolve over time, also with Arabic language, we have masculine and feminine, like French, like Spanish, like German, like we have that. So when you read the script, there are certain things that are assigned to men and women that people cannot see beyond. That I find, talking about linguistics, that I find a little bit limiting. So these are the things that I can tell you, and the specific instructions that made sense 1,000 years ago, but right now we are struggling to expand it to our modern life and marrying them with our definition of human rights these days.
Right. Now, tell me, is my understanding correct? And I'm sure it varies from country to country, that there are obviously a lot of prohibitions around homosexuality and being gay, as we've discussed. But what I think my understanding is that in some countries in particular, that people are more open to those who are transgender. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse, I have to say. So first of all, we have intersex recognized in some of the countries within the Middle East and Muslim, culture and script. And so that's intersex, because many people, they can't distinguish kind of between all of these, right? As soon as you say gay, they say, oh, are they trans? Are they pedophile? Are they whatever? They don't even, distinguish. So that's that, intersex. There are also terms in some of the countries within the Middle East for it, like the Polynesian culture, for example. The other one is the gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer. So all of these have different treatments within different cultures, right? Transgender, unfortunately, Iran, so for example, was one of the first countries that, the supreme leader said, well, if you really feel like you're trapped in a male body, then please, by all means. So it was really progressive for a religious leader to do that. And everybody jumped on it. It was fantastic until it wasn't.
Yeah, there's a darker side.
The darker side became the society was not quite ready for them. The other one is because you're not allowed to be gay, then you choose the other route.
Yep.
If I'm in a male body, I'm actually quite fine to be male. I just prefer a male partner, as an intimate partner, as a companion for myself. Now I'm going to change myself to a woman. And I go all the way to change all of my body parts to become a woman and then be in a relationship with a man.
Yeah.
That is not, it's not even comprehensible.
And that's what's happening. Yeah.
That's what's happening. The other thing is, so we can go talk about so many different things.
I know there's so many different things we could talk about. I'm curious, do you know if there are any sex positive messages that are written in the Quran that might be overlooked?
Absolutely. So you talked about pleasure a little bit earlier. There are detailed books that, people know about Kama Sutra.
Yeah.
I invite you to read Islamic text. I mean,
like the perfumed garden.
Perfumed garden. Well, I don't know the names in English because I read them in the actual the language, but that's a good one. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting, for example, Haliyatul Mutaqin, there are so many different texts. It is really interesting because they are so specific about using the 5 senses to create sexual excitation. And it's both partners. Yeah. It's never gender specific. It's both partners. There's a hadith from a prophet himself that says, don't be like a sparrow that goes and to your female partner and goes away. Make sure that, both parties are aligned. So it's really, this is a poor translation, but I think that's what it is. So it's really interesting just to see that these are the parts that I think we can analyze Islam and what is, wrong and limiting and, all of that without dismissing it, obviously. But on the other side of it, again, if we are practitioners to move the needle forward, to find a way, we should become that water that doesn't need to move the blocks, but finds a way through or around the blocks to get the job done, which is creating satisfactory relationships, preserving bodily integrity, bringing consensual, dynamic to the coupledom. So these are the things that, at least use what we can to make people's lives more satisfactory.
If you liked this video, drop me a like and subscribe below. Share with a friend who might find it interesting. You can also listen to this in podcast form anywhere podcasts are streamed by searching for Love and Libido with Dr. Emily Jamea. Finally, follow me across all social media channels at Dr. Emily Jamea for daily emotional and physical intimacy tips.